an informational presentation from Amtrak, which I think we'll all find valuable and of interest. We'll be talking about the Big Sky Passenger Rail Authority leadership and selecting officers for this board. We will hopefully be soliciting some volunteers to create some interim subcommittees just to help get this entity off the ground. And then we'll have some discussion related to strategic planning and a framework for planning going forward. This may or may not take the full allotted time that we have today, but that's okay. We are still in the organizational preliminary preliminary mode of this board. So we're delighted that you're all with us on this adventure, creating this really historic entity for the state of Montana. We also have with us today Dan Clark from MSU's Local Government Center. He'll be helping facilitate portions of the meeting that involve the selection of officers and also talking us through some of the next steps related to developing a strategic framework. I would invite any or all of the board members who want to go ahead and turn your cameras off. I would ask that members of the public who are not directors of the board don't activate your cameras until you want to speak. There will be opportunities for public comment throughout the meeting, one at the beginning and then later on. If you are using the internet to connect today and would like to offer comment, please use the Microsoft Teams raise hand function if you could. There's a little icon of a hand up in the toolbar. Activate that and I will call on you in the order in which your name appears on my screen. We will also, if there are any folks who are dialing in using their phone, I will try to call out the last 4 digits of your phone number and give you a chance to weigh in at the appropriate point then also. If there are folks who are using their phone, remember to type in *6, which will unmute yourself or mute yourself as the case may be. I would like to introduce Violet Plummer. She's on our admin staff here in Missoula County. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm again Dave Strohmeyer, Missoula County Commissioner. Violet has been so kind as to take minutes for our last meeting, and we'll be taking minutes for our meeting today. And we will begin with Violet doing roll call for us. So Violet, would you like to call the roll?
I sure will. Luckily, or not luckily, but no one's calling in on the phone, so I can just read through the participants that we have here if you want me to do that, Dave.
Yeah, or do you have the list of board members in front of you, Violet?
I don't.
Okay, that's fine. Why don't I just call out the names of the board members and you can take note, Violet, of who is present and in attendance.
Sure. Thanks, Dave.
So from Broadwater County, Daryl Folkford, board. Okay, Butte-Silverboe County, Sean Frederickson.
Thank you, Chairman Strohmeyer. I'm here.
Okay, thank you. From Dawson County, Jason Stewart.
Hello, everybody. I'm here.
Hi, Jason. Gallatin County, Scott McFarland.
Here, Commissioner.
Granite County, Bill Slaughter. Jefferson County, Mayor Mary Hensley. Again, I'm Dave Strohmeyer representing Missoula County. Park County, Bill Berg.
Here.
Powell County, Terry Jennings.
Present.
Prairie County, Deanna Bachnes. Sanders County, Jerry McDonald.
Present.
And Webo County, Edward Anderson.
Present.
Okay, I think that was a present.
Yep.
Thanks, Edward. All right. Thanks, everyone. It looks like we have a quorum today. And if folks not speaking, if you could mute your microphone, that would be fantastic. Getting some feedback here. Okay, I think we're good. Thanks, Violet. So to kick things off, is there any public comment on items on our agenda, or I would broaden it to say anything that's not on the agenda also? Any public comment? And again, folks, if you're out there and want to speak, go ahead and raise your hand and I will call on you in the order in which you raise your hand. Okay, no takers at this time. That is perfectly fine. We'll give you other opportunities later on. We do have minutes from January 5th, our first meeting. Are there any corrections or additions to those meetings? Okay, seeing none, they will be accepted as presented. So as I mentioned, we were blessed to have with us today Rob Eaton, representative from Amtrak. He'll be providing a high-level overview of Amtrak for us, and I think this will really help set the stage for conversations going forward and provide a bit of meat to the bones of what otherwise could be a fairly dry discussion of just the mechanics and logistics of getting an authority like this up and running and off the ground. So with that, I will turn it over to Rob, who's Director of Government Affairs, National, State, and Local Legislative Relations. He hails from the state of Washington. And Rob, it's all yours. I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, members of the board. My name is Rob Eaton. I've been with Amtrak for 10 years in their Government Affairs Department. Before that, I worked with Amtrak and BNSF Railway as the mayor of Leavenworth, Washington, where I worked on a campaign to actually secure a train station along the Empire Builder Route that passed through my town. It was a successful campaign. It did take some time. With the only casualty, I think, is my hairline. So as you go down this journey, I am going to caution you and as well as encourage you. It's going to be a long journey. I was given some good advice from the BNSF Railway as well as Amtrak, Kurt Laird at the time. It's going to be a worthwhile journey, but it's going to take some time. So don't get frustrated. And my role at Amtrak is to help support you in your efforts and point you in the direction with contacts, but not only with the host railroad of Montana Rail Link, but also our organization. So with that today, Dave asked me to provide a very high-level overview of who we are at Amtrak and some opportunities that you will have in the future. So with the next slide, if you could please. Basically, a brief history of how we came about, and some of you may know that, but in the 1950s and 60s, other transportation pressures were coming along and they were receiving a lot of funding versus the railroads, passenger rail, that was actually operated by the freight railroads. They had freight and passenger divisions. So basically what was happening is that passenger rail was being starved out with support for the other modes. So Congress decided to act for the public good and create Amtrak as a private corporation that would receive funding from the federal government to meet our mission of passenger rail and interconnectivity, and relieve the freight railroads of their obligation to provide passenger service. We were a ragtag team of railroaders back in 1971. We received actually the old passenger equipment from some of the freight railroads. The personnel that worked for the freight railroads who wanted to stay on the passenger side came with us, and that's how we were created. With that creation, though, we were actually given some preferential rights. We have rights to access the freight railroad or the rail tracks themselves. We have preferential access where we're treated before freight trains, incremental costs to access those rights, and then there's other indemnification. And as we go down the journey of becoming passenger rail in the southern tier, you'll learn more about that. But Today, we actually operate, or I should say pre-COVID, we actually operate over 305 trains a day over a route system map of 21,000 miles. Interesting fact of that is that out of those 21,400 miles, Amtrak actually owns only slightly over 300 of those miles. We operate on a significant majority of rail that is owned by the host railroads. We have over 500 stations that we serve throughout the country, 46 states, 3 provinces, and of course, DC. And we have an approximate workforce of about 19,000. And I believe we have over 16 unions that we work with that represents our workforce. Next slide would be great. In the last 22 years, we've actually made some significant progress. Our ridership is up 70%, over the 30 million mark, which is significant. Our passenger ticket revenue is up 144% in those 22 years. And then we've done a really good job on bringing down our debt, service debt. In 2002, we invested over $2 billion in our national fleet of Acellas. That's why we had that peak in 2002. And we've actually reduced that to present day numbers, a 63% reduction. So the health of our company is quite well, even despite COVID. Next slide would be great. Some highlights from pre-COVID. As I mentioned, we were on a run of 9 consecutive years of record ridership growth in passenger rail, topping out at 32.5 million passengers. So it was an incredible run of 9 years. And we actually had an adjusting operating loss of only $29.4 million after our revenue as well as the federal appropriation. It's the lowest in our history. And we were actually on track to do even a less of an operating loss and more ridership until COVID hit. Our overall total revenue is in the $3 billion range, and we actually spent a lot of money last year. It was our largest capital project in investing in not only the infrastructure of the Northeast Corridor, but also in our rolling stock. Combined, we're doing a good job in terms of cost recovery. It's in the 99% with all of our holdings, including real estate. So the next page. So what you will hear, and I've talked to Dave about this quite a bit, is the Passenger Rail Investment and Improvement Act of 2008, which is known as PRIA. Basically, that legislation in 2008 changed the landscape of American railroading in our country. Previously, Amtrak would operate our long-distance national network trains, and we would partner with states to provide regional corridor service, and it was not a standardized way of providing that service. In 2008, working with the states approached Congress, and they created Section 209, which actually was a methodology of how all states would be treated equally in terms of the methodology of providing passenger service in corridors of 750 miles of length or less. Here in the West, the major corridors that are closest to the great state of Montana are the Amtrak Cascades in Oregon and Washington, also serving British Columbia. And then we have the 3 in California, the San Joaquin's Capital Corridor and the Pacific Surfliner. So that's where in 2008, while we formed a definitive category, if you will, of types of service, our long distance, our state supported, and then the Northeast Corridor. I'm going to jump into a little bit about each of those services now. So next slide, please. Here's a quick overview map of what we look like in the country. The yellow or gold color is our national long distance trains. Blue is the state corridors, which are funded by state dollars to help support those corridors. And then the red is the Northeast Corridor. And that, like I said, about 373 miles of that 400 plus mile corridor is actually owned by Amtrak. So next slide. Our long distance trains, near and dear to my heart, because my community is served by the Empire Builder, which also serves the great state of Montana on the High Line. In FY19, we had just over 4.5 million passengers using all of our 15 long distance routes throughout the country with over $530 million in revenue that was offsetting our operating expenses. We're very serious about our long distance trains. Larry Chesler is our relatively new Vice President of Long Distance Services, and he's committed to working with all of the teams at Amtrak and communities on providing a better way to modernize our long distance train service. We have some issues that we're working with our host railroads about on-time performance, but that has been a long time issue. So hopefully we do have a new standards, metrics and standards that was introduced by the Surface Transportation Board and FRA this past year. So we're hoping to see improvements in our long distance train service, which would actually better our passengers and at all the stations and destinations. We do have an aging rolling stock. Like I mentioned to you, we inherited a lot of equipment that's been overhauled from way back when we started 50 years ago. We are committed to procuring new long distance rolling stock in the near future as our funding continues. And we're looking for better ways to serve many of these communities, of the 500 communities that we do serve. So next slide. State supported. 15.5 million riders. It's a significant chunk of our ridership throughout the country. We actually have 20 state partners that we work with to provide service to the communities and states. Like I said, PRIA was formed to establish standards methodology of allocating the costs. Just a side note, as a result of the pandemic, it has definitely demonstrated some weaknesses to PRIA, Section 209, and I know Congress and the states through the SAPRC, which is the State Amtrak Intercity Passenger Rail Committee, are looking at methodologies to kind of shore up that approach of how we provide service for routes of under 750 miles in length. But the ridership has grown over the last 20 years, as you see. 66% is a strong growth over those 20 years. So corridors are part of our very strong part of our future, as long as the long distance trains. Next slide would be the farthest away from you folks is the Northeast Corridor. Ridership is 12.5 million and growing. This is a corridor between Boston and Washington, D.C. that handles a significant amount of the Northeast business community. And you see the revenue is in the 1.3 billion range. We actually, this is the only railroad, except for some in the Midwest, a little small section in the Midwest that we actually own. So it makes it a lot easier to control our operations over that period of track. However, it's an old infrastructure. As you can see there, we have a lot of movable bridges and tunnels and viaducts that we need to replace. So Amtrak will be looking forward to continuing to strengthen that corridor as it's a very important part of the national system. So that turns us over to you folks, the next slide. What you have done in the state of Montana is definitely historic. You've created a rail authority without direct, action from the legislature or the governor's office. I think you should be commended of putting this group together to introduce and have the discussions about passenger rail in the southern tier. There's a lot of ideas out there. There's been a lot of information, a lot of studies that have been done about passenger rail in the southern tier. You've had in the past passenger rail down there. So there's a lot of information that the committee, I should say the authority, will be going over. And if you go to the next slide, kind of the next stop for you on this journey is going to be, your organization as you're starting to move forward, deciding your path forward and your visioning approach, answering questions about what type of intercity passenger rail do you want? Where do you want it to go? Do you want it to be just within the state of Montana, or do you want to connect to other states? And then where does it connect to other existing intercity passenger rail to form part of the network? You're also going to have conversations. You're going to need to have conversations with your legislature and also as Montana Department of Transportation and determine what type of relationship you want to have with the Department of Transportation. But here at Amtrak, what our role is, part of that statutory authority is access to the host railroad. We will be your conduit to the host railroad, to Montana Rail Link, who leases the infrastructure to BNSF. So we've had some initial conversations. I had some initial meetings with Montana Rail Link. Commissioner Strohmeyer was so kind to invite me earlier this year. We had some in-person meetings, as well as I met with Montana Rail Link. They know of you, obviously, but your relationship with Montana Rail Link will have to be strong as well, since it's their host, they're the host, it's their infrastructure. But what I hope to do and my team was to work with you as you develop your vision for the type of service you want. We will provide you guidance and support where appropriate. We have a resource of information regarding old studies, as well as our experience of modeling cost allocations for both long distance and state supported. And my role here is to serve as a resource for you as you go down this journey. So this is just the beginning of a conversation, and I'm here to serve you folks through meetings and workshops and gathering information and providing it to you. There will be no shortage of individuals wanting to offer their assistance as you develop through this, as consultants. There are other rail authorities, the Front Range Rail Authority, the Southern Rail Commission, great models as they've developed for their service. You have great resources before you to help you inform and kind of guide you as how you develop your authority and your vision for passenger rail. So I'm looking forward to working with you in the future. Of course, always open to questions. And Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Rob. That's great. And I would invite all of the board members, if you want to go ahead and feel free to turn your cameras on so we can see one another. But this is an opportunity for some Q&A before Rob leaves us and before we move on to the next agenda item. And just knowing that Rob and Amtrak will be a resource for us going forward, so we can probably on any given topic pick that out for a standalone agenda item at a future meeting and drill down a little deeper. So I'd invite any questions or comments from the directors. Jerry. Looks like you are muted. There we go.
It's unmuted. Rob, thank you very much. I really enjoyed the presentation. There was one bullet point that caused me to ask this question. What is the impediment that you're talking about in that bullet point with the host rail?
There is actually a number of questions, and actually just for reasons, there's just for clarity. Also, I served on your the Montana Host Railroad Competition Council years ago, just so you know. So basically with the host railroads right now, it's a cultural, some of it's cultural, where some host railroads do not give us the statutory preference that we have afforded to us. So we work with the host railroads on a ongoing basis to kind of remove that. And the secondary part of the issue is with the host railroads building longer trains. They're building longer trains that would not accommodate their current infrastructure. So their trains cannot go into the siding, so they would force Amtrak to go into the siding as they pass. So we are working at Amtrak with our host railroads to kind of work that out. And you'll see coming up, and I'll be able to provide to the authority some legislation that we're going to be introducing that will help that problem and help our host railroads to get there. It's going to take capital investment, but also to improve the railroads on their behalf, but also to honor their statutory, our statutory rights.
Thanks, Rob. Additional questions from directors or comments? Yes.
Yeah, Robert, in specific to that, obviously here in Montana, the host railroad we have to work with is BNSF Railway. So how do they, in terms of culture or whatever, and that issue, how does BNSF perform?
Actually, BNSF has been one of our strongest allies in passenger rail. So their attitude towards passenger rail is one of the best in the country.
Thanks, Jason. Additional comments, questions? Okay, let's take some questions or comments from the public. Paul Pacini.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. Robert, it wasn't clear to me if, when you said you're going to, Amtrak could serve as a resource to the authority, if you're talking about Amtrak trains being on the tracks in Montana, or could you be a resource for us even if we had another organization supply the trains? For example, I know this is a long shot, but what if Montana Rail Link, for example, said, well, this could be profitable. I think we'll put our trains on the track for passengers. Are you still, I guess I have two questions. Do you see Amtrak trains on our tracks? And if not, would you still be a resource for us if another company were to supply the trains?
Sure, Paul, thank you for the question. Obviously, Amtrak will want to be the operator of choice. So that's one thing, and we will continue to work with the authority towards that. I think we're, regardless of who provides the trains, there's a lot of questions there. You know, providing rolling stock, who operates it? There's many scenarios in American passenger railroading where different people or different organizations own the trains. The state of California owns some trains and we operate it on their behalf. The state of Washington owns locomotives and we operate on their behalf. So as the commission, as the authority goes down and self-determines of what type of service they want, we will go along and continue that journey. We, like I said at the very beginning of my remark, we would want to be the operator of choice, obviously, where we would operate and serve those trains. But we will continue to be a resource because it's promoting passenger rail. Yep. And if I may, there's lots of questions that the authority needs to address as well as to, does the authority want to own passenger equipment, or do they want to use the equipment that Amtrak provides, whether it's via the long distance service or the state supported? So there's a lot of questions that need to be sussed out as the commission goes down the line.
Thank you for that, Paul. Let's just check in with, we have a few folks on the line on their phones. Let me just read off the last 4 digits of your number. And if in so doing you want to comment, please unmute yourself and comment. And at this point, if you want to comment directly to Rob's presentation, feel free, or since you have not had the opportunity yet to just comment in general and introduce yourself, please do so also. So caller 8053. Okay. Caller 0903. How about caller 7436? All right, you are lurking in the background. I'll give you another opportunity later on to comment if you would like, but regardless, welcome to our meeting. Any final comments or questions for Rob, just knowing that Rob will probably be a frequent fixture at some of these meetings, so we'll have the opportunity to put some questions his way in the future also. Paul, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I have one other question. Thank you. The way I understand Amtrak's organization, when Amtrak offered to take passenger rail and operate it from a national perspective rather than the freight trains having a passenger rail department or whatever it was, I understand there was an agreement that passenger rail companies across the country would provide access to their rails to any Amtrak train that would use those rails. Do you see any problem in working with Montana Rail Link or Burlington Northern Santa Fe along those lines?
Rob, you're muted. Don't you love the world of virtual reality that we're in?
Yeah, I know. Exactly. Clearly not enough coffee on board. Starting from your first part of your question, we were created because the freight railroads at the time, their passenger divisions were not making money because of all the federal investment in other modes. So that's where the freight rails decided to abandon their passenger service. So that's how Congress created us. And you're exactly right. With that came our statutory right was access to the rails. We work with our host railroads all the time to gain access and exercise our statutory rights, but it's not necessarily always that simple. Our approach is we like to work with the host railroads. They have a business. They operate and they serve the state of Montana from an economic point of view. So going down the line as we have conversations with BNSF and Montana Rail Link, there are going to be some needs that need to be met that will accommodate additional rail traffic in whatever proposed route that you have. We've worked successfully with multiple host railroads to identify what capital improvements will be needed. An example is the Southwest Chief, where BNSF and the UP, where we're making improvements through federal grant programs to actually to invest in, not us, but the states and the cities invest in the rail infrastructure to allow for passenger rail. So that being said, I envision a working relationship with host railroads where the state of Montana, this authority, works with Montana Rail Link and us identifying capital improvements that are going to be needed over whatever route should be selected, and then applying for federal funds to make those improvements to allow passenger rail, but also do no harm to the economic benefit that's being derived from the host railroads.
Thank you, Rob.
Yeah, thank you, Rob.
Well, thanks so much, Rob, for taking some time out of your day to share with us. Before we move on, I just want to query the group here, especially in case any of the phone numbers are associated with these counties. Do we have representatives from Broadwater, Jefferson, or Granite counties on the line right now? And if you're on the phone, you'll have to hit *6 to unmute yourself. Okay, I guess not. Okay, we'll move on. As far as old business goes, there was a question brought up last time about the need for liability insurance for the authority, and we have been doing some checking on that. Dory Brownlow, are you out there? Dory is Missoula County's Development and Economic Development Director. We were checking with the Montana Association of Counties to see if we could utilize them as a source of insurance, if you will. And we've also
Hello?
Hello, who is speaking here?
This is Mary, the mayor of Whitehall, Jefferson County.
Oh, hi, Mary. Welcome.
Hi. Thank you. I've had a hell of a time getting on this call.
Well, let's take a brief break here from what I was talking about. And Mary, during our first meeting, we gave all of the board members an opportunity just to introduce themselves and just say a few words about why you are interested in representing your county on this authority. So I'd like to extend that opportunity to you right now also.
All right. Well, like I said, I'm Mary, the mayor of Whitehall, married Jenna Carol Hensley. I grew up here in Whitehall. Whitehall has always been a railroad town. Right now, it's just commercial train traffic, but we would very much like to add passenger.
Great. Well, thanks, Mary. It's a delight to have you on the board with us. So thanks for representing Jefferson County and your community in Whitehall.
It's my pleasure.
You bet. So anyway, as far as liability insurance goes, no definitive answers right now. We're checking on some sources. Dory, if you're out there and happen to have an update, feel free to chime in.
Great, thanks, Dave. I don't really have an update. We're looking at Mako. We're looking at a couple private insurers. It appears we may need more information for the authority, such as the tax ID number before we can apply, but we're working through that, and we'll keep pushing forward and see what looks like the best way to go, and assume Dave will then want to bring that to the board. I don't know that we'll have that in 2 weeks. With the legislature, Mako, there's a bit delay, so we may or may not have that the next meeting. But
so thankfully at this point, unless you guys do something wild and crazy and have a slip and fall in your house during one of these meetings, I think we're pretty low risk liability wise as the authority right now. Right. But we'll continue to scope that out and report back to you. Or if any of you out there have a lead on who we might check with on liability insurance for an entity like the authority, please let us know. All right. The other point that I would just want to mention as a follow-up from our last meeting is what our web presence might look like as an authority. For the time being, we've been piggybacking on the Montana Passenger Rail Summit website. There's a page on there devoted to the rail authority, and we've just been using that as our default landing page for now for all things related to the authority. But as I think I might have indicated last time, we have some available bandwidth with our county's IT staff, and one of our web developers is putting together the initial architecture for a website for us. So that will be probably a good opportunity for our hopefully soon to be created interim communications subcommittee to engage with our web developer to get something to bring back before the board. So that's in the works. So moving on to, unless there's any comments on any of that, we'll move on to the new business that we have before us today. And at this point, I will turn it over to Dan Clark from MSU's Local Government Center. Dan will help walk us through election of officers. We'll talk a bit about how we might go about staggering terms for all of us right out of the gate here, and then establishing some interim subcommittees and talking then a bit about developing a strategic framework, et cetera. So Dan, are you out there?
I am. Can you hear me?
We can both hear you and we can see you.
Oh, that's unfortunate for all of you. Thank you, Dave. Appreciate the opportunity to work with the board. Welcome board members or authority members. Glad you're all here. So two things we want to deal with. One is going through the process of electing the leadership for the authority. And I just want to say express my gratitude for allowing me the opportunity to spend about an hour reading through Robert's Rules of Order, the official guide, which that was a lovely experience. I was able to take 2 naps during that time. So I think I have a process dialed in that will be, that should work for us. If you recall from our discussion we had last week, there are 4 positions that we want to seek nominations for. That's going to be the presiding officer, the vice presiding officer, secretary, and a treasurer. Now, those responsibilities of those particular positions have yet to be determined. So this is, as we talked about earlier, it's a chicken and the egg, flying the plane, building the plane while we fly it, or as Dave likes to refer to, building the train while it's on the track, trying to make sure we've got this thing going forward. So we decided to go ahead at least with the election of officers, and then the interim subcommittee that's going to create the rules of procedure and bylaws may flesh out more of the duties and responsibilities of each of these. So if you're willing to step forward and serve in these positions for this initial term, it would be greatly appreciated just to fill that vacancy while we stand up this committee. So from my readings, this is what the process that we're going to follow. I'm going to open the nominations from the floor for you to nominate either yourself or some other board member to serve in one of the positions, one of the leadership positions, and I'll go through each one of them one at a time. If it is someone other than yourself that you're nominating, we'll seek from that person their consent to be considered for that position. If they say, no, I don't want to do it, then we'll remove their name. The leadership can only be, the members nominated can only be members of the authority, the board of directors, and the nominations can only come from board members. All right, I think that's the framework we're going to operate from. Any questions so far? All right, so I will go ahead and the other thing is we don't need a second. I won't seek a second for the nomination. That's just what it says. So we won't need a second. And what I'll do is I'll seek nominations for the presiding officer, and then we'll close that when we feel like all of the nominations have been presented, and then we'll proceed to vote on that. And I'll ask for a vote. And if there are 2 individuals, the first person that was nominated will be asked for a vote first, and we'll ask for the vote, those in favor, those opposed, and it will be a majority. So if the first person gets a majority, then the second person won't be considered because they get a majority of the votes, if that makes sense. We're going to force you to have 1 vote. So, or 1 vote in the affirmative. All right, so I will open the floor for nominations for the board presiding officer. All right, it's Jason, Commissioner Jason.
Yes, well, I hope he doesn't mind, but to me, there's only one clear choice for this position, and that's the person who is most responsible for getting us this far, and that would be Commissioner David Strohmeyer.
You can tell that's a shocked face that he's expressing right now. He's flabbergasted that you'd even consider him for this position. All right, so Dave, would you be willing to accept that nomination?
I would be willing to accept that nomination. Thanks, Jason.
Okay. Is there any other nominations from the floor for presiding officer? Any other nominations? Seeing no other nominations, we'll go ahead and close the nomination for the presiding officer. And since we only have 1 candidate, without objection, we'll go ahead and seat David Strohmeyer as the presiding officer of the Rail Authority. Any objection? Seeing none, congratulations, David.
Thank you.
All right, so the next one will open up the floor for nominations for vice presiding officer. Is there anyone that would be open to nominating someone for vice presiding officer? Oh, this is going to be a long meeting. Any nominations? And you can nominate yourself or someone else.
I understand that nominations have to come from the board or from the floor.
From the board. So the nominations come from the board members, and board members are the only ones eligible for those positions. Yeah. I see several board members turn their cameras off too. All right, one last call for nomination for vice chair or vice.
It looks like Jason Stewart, Dan, has raised his hand.
I see it. Okay, Jason, go ahead and.
Well, I was just going to say, to move things along, I'll volunteer if nobody else wants to say anything, but.
Okay. All right, Jason, thank you. So we've got one nomination. Is there any other nominations from the floor? Any other nominations? Other nominations? All right, seeing no other nominations, we'll go ahead and close the nominations, and we'll proceed to vote on the election of Jason Stewart to be the vice presiding officer. Well, actually, without objection from the group, we'll go ahead and seat Jason. Is there any objections? All right, seeing no objections, congratulations, Jason. That was a hard-fought battle. Make sure you do all the proper reporting for your campaign financing, the Commissioner of Political Practices. All right, so the next one to consider is secretary, position of secretary. Is there anyone, we'll open up nominations for secretary from board members nominating yourself or someone else. Any nominations for Secretary of the Authority?
Hey, Dan, this is Dave. Yep. Could you maybe explain, using your silver-tongued prose, explain what the secretary does? Because this would not, my understanding is this would, at least my preference would be that the secretary would not necessarily be the person taking notes during a meeting like this. But in your experience, Dan, what would a secretary for a board like this typically do?
Yeah, that's great question. So the secretary of a board like this, you would likely have someone else not on the board taking minutes. I think the level that this board operates, that it's imperative that all of the members are able to fully engage and participate. And if someone were to be the secretary, they may not be able to be fully engaged in the discussion and work of the board. So typically, like what you have going on here, David, the gal, I just lost her name.
Violet.
Violet, thank you. Violet's taking the minutes so that the board can be fully engaged. My thought is for this particular role of the secretary, they would ensure that the minutes are properly developed and created and are distributed to the board members for their review prior to the meeting. They would ensure, not necessarily be responsible for doing it themselves, but ensuring that the meetings are being properly noticed. That they would also ensure that the records are being kept according to the retention schedule from the Secretary of State's office. Just making sure that the statutory operations of the board, making sure it's transparent, meeting its statutory obligations for records is being met. May not necessarily be that individual doing that work. It may be other people assigned by the board to deal with that, but you're responsible for overseeing and making sure it's completed. Does that help, David?
Yeah, totally.
So with that apparently silver-tongued explanation, we'll open the floor again. Is there anyone that would like to nominate someone to be the Secretary of the Authority?
Mr. Clark, this is Bill Berg. I would be willing to serve in that position.
Thank you, Commissioner Bill Berg. Appreciate your willingness to step forward. Is there anyone else that would like to run for that office in addition to Bill Berg? Anyone else? Any other nominations? All right, we'll go ahead and close the nominations. And without objection, we'll accept, we'll accept Bill Berg as being the secretary for the Rail Authority. Is there any objection? Seeing none, congratulations, Bill. And finally, we have treasurer. Is there anyone that is willing to serve or to nominate someone to be the treasurer? And again, the treasurer would make sure that the finance information is all compiled, is sent out to the board prior to meetings for their review. They would be responsible for reviewing the financial report during the meetings, but may not necessarily be the ones that with the calculator and the pen and the pencil and the spreadsheet trying to do it all. That would likely be done by a hosting county that would take care of the finances within their finance department. But this person would be responsible for ensuring that the board is informed about the financial conditions of the board. And probably a signer on what if you get a, on your accounts and those types of things for money distribution. So anyone willing to be nominated for or to nominate someone for the treasurer of the Rail Authority? Jerry.
Yeah, I don't think it's like I'd be willing to take on that role.
Great. Thank you, Jerry. Is there anyone else that would like to also put their name in the hat to be the treasurer? Anyone else? Any other nominations? See no other nominations. We'll close the nominations and go ahead without objection from the group. We'll go ahead and seat Jerry McDonald as the treasurer for the Rail Authority. So congratulations. I don't know if there's a hand clapping emoji that you can do. So David, do you want me to just roll right into the next part, or do you want to give some context?
Yeah, if you could, Dan. Well, I guess just preliminarily, typically what works best in these board settings is that the terms are staggered such that we don't have simultaneously 12 board members all needing to be reappointed at the end of their terms, but also if it comes down to how to go about staggering the terms, how do we do so in an equitable manner? And I think Dan may have come up with a solution to that.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Yeah, and so if we were doing this in person, we would probably draw straws or pull a card out of a hat or something to that effect. So, what I have done is I've got this bag, and in it has a piece of paper. There's 4 pieces of paper with the number 1 on it, 4 pieces of paper with the 2 on it, and 4 pieces of paper with a 3 on it. And what I'll do is I will select the name from the roll call, and I'll pull out a number from my bag, and that number will be the term of that individual. Now, for those of you that are going to receive the 1-year term, don't freak out. Just when this year term is completed at the end of 2021, going into the next year, you can either seek reappointment or you can retire and someone else can be appointed. But after that 1 year, you'll be serving for the entire 3-year term. And we'll get to the adding people in a minute. I've got some thoughts on that. So are we ready?
So Dan, before we go on, I just want to give the board a chance. Are folks okay with that process? Okay. Okay, we got a thumbs up there from Sanders County. So,
yep. And a head nod from the Makoshika State Park. So that was good. All right. So first on the list there is Daryl Folkford, and he is going to be. Can you see that? Number 1. You gonna keep track of this?
Yep.
Okay. Number 1.
Daryl, are you out there? I didn't see you earlier. Okay, we'll follow up with Daryl.
Okay. All right. Next is Sean Fredrickson. Oh, it's invisible. It's a 3. There we go. Got a number 3, so 3-year term. Next will be Jason Stewart. Oh, Jason, a number 1. The vice chair already is on the chopping block. All right, so then Scott McFarland is going to get a number 3. Next is Bill Slaughter, gets a number 1. I feel like there should be music or something while we do this. A drum roll. Mary Hensley. Mary Hensley gets a number 1, 1-year term. Next one is Dave Strohmeyer. Gets 2. Bill Berg is going to receive a 3. Terry Jennings is going to get a 2. Deanna Brockness, get a 2. Jerry McDonald, a 3. And finally, Edward Anderson is 2. So that'll be the terms, and then when that that'll create the staggered terms. My suggestion is when new counties join and their we'll just say new representatives join. Think of those as 1, 2, and 3-year blocks or term cycles. And so you can assign them wherever they are in that cycle. Assign the first one to number 1, the second one group that joins goes to number 2, third group that joins goes to number 3, and just keep rotating it through, adding to each one. So you'll for a time maybe have 5 members expiring at 1, and then 4 the next 2, and then 5 and 5 and 4, then 5, 5, 5, if that makes sense. Yeah. So that would be a way to do that. So that's just some of the stuff that you need to deal with as you get these organizations started. It's the same as if we were to create a new city or a new county. They would go through, right after their first meeting, go through a process of selecting the terms of their office. And then after that, they run for their full term after that first initial cycle. So I think I'm done unless there's other questions. I'll turn it back to you, Commissioner Strohmeyer.
Thanks, Dan. And you won't be off the hook entirely. We'll come back to you to talk a little bit about strategic planning later on. But again, in the spirit of building this train while it is already headed down the tracks, it seems like we need to probably establish a few interim subcommittees to help with the nuts and bolts of moving the authority along. And as we develop bylaws, these interim subcommittees might morph into being actual standing subcommittees or not, but that will be a discussion yet to come. So thus far, we've identified a handful that seem logical. One, a rules of procedure or bylaws committee, another being strategic planning, another being communication and public relations. That one I think would certainly be tackling anything related to branding, developing the website and communication strategies, and then finally finance. And there are any number of very basic tasks there that need to be accomplished, whether it's looking for who might fill the need of being a fiscal sponsor of the authority, or getting our tax ID number, or all of those preliminary issues that we need to deal with. So Dan, before we take I wouldn't say nominations, but open it up for volunteers for these various subcommittees. Is there anything you'd want to say about the strategic planning subcommittee, what they might actually be about?
Yeah, so at some point, this group is going to need to create at least a strategic plan, some sort of a plan that's defines who are you, what do you hope to accomplish, right? Which some of that could be gleaned from the resolution, the enabling legislation that created you. But a vision statement, creating some values, core organizational values, and then what are the goals that you're going to be operating on for the next, 2 to 3, 4 years? What are your goals that you have set? And so that process, I think, should be done by the entire board. However, I believe the strategic planning committee can be the one that can figure out how to plan that, organize it, and I've offered up my I'll be willing to help go through the facilitate the strategic planning process. So I would need help from a core group of people to frame out. Are we going to create a survey? What to survey the members? Are we going to externally connect with people? How do we frame this out? How big of a strategic plan do we want to make this? And frame that out, and then I can then have a template or a blueprint, so to speak, to facilitate the planning process with the organization. But I think it's going to be important for the organization to define that rather than me define it for you. So that's the role of the strategic planning group, to help facilitate that.
Great. Thanks, Dan. And no pressure on anyone. This is totally volunteer, but clearly the more we can spread out the workload here, the better. And I'm very cognizant of the fact that all of you have other commitments in life, and be that employment or otherwise. So we're not looking at over taxing any of you, but I think there's some important work that can be done by these subcommittees between the actual full board meetings like we're having here today. So I'm just going to read off the subcommittees, and if folks want to offer up their name to help, that would be great. And I will break the ice and be more than willing to serve on the Rules of Procedure or Bylaws subcommittee. Any other folks for bylaws? Sean Frederickson.
Thank you, Commissioner Strohmeyer. I'd be willing to serve on the bylaws committee with you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Jerry.
Yeah, Commissioner, I'd be happy to be on that committee with you.
Thank you. Anyone else have a passion for bylaws? Okay, well, you can always change your mind if you wake up tonight and decide, you know what, I hope that ship hasn't sailed. I'd like to be on the bylaws subcommittee. You still can, but we'll move on. How about strategic planning? Terry.
Yeah, I'd like to handle that one, and I look forward to it. Thank you.
You bet. Anyone else for strategic planning? Bill Berg.
Yeah, I'd be happy to be a part of that.
Okay.
Hey, Scott McFarland here too. I'd be happy to participate in that with those guys.
Great. So we got Terry, Bill, Scott. Anyone else for strategic planning? Keep your powder dry. There's a couple other subcommittees coming up here. We've got communications and public relations. I'd be willing to also participate in that. Jason?
Well, since I am a former newspaper man and still part-time one, that probably is right up my alley.
Okay. Scott, is your hand up from the last time still, or are you volunteering for yet another?
Oh, it was just still up.
Okay, no problem.
I do look good in front of a camera though, so if you ever need.
We will keep that in mind. Anyone else for communications? Okay, well, it'll be myself and Jason, I guess, for starters. And again, the offer holds. If you want to participate in that, you can at any point. How about finance? Very good. It looks like our treasurer has volunteered. Is that correct, Jerry?
That's correct. It seems natural that a treasurer should be on a finance committee.
Okay. Anyone want to join Jerry on the finance committee? Jerry, it's looking like you're going to have to bring home the bacon.
Well, is it possible I could nominate somebody? I see a sea of willing faces out there.
Anyone else want to join Jerry on the finance subcommittee? Jerry, I will at least start, I'll at least join you so you're not completely feeling isolated, and consider me an interim subcommittee member.
Thank you, Commissioner. It would be my honor to have you serve interimly.
Okay. Well, thanks. That's good to get us all going, I think. One question I have for the group, I've gotten any number of offers from non-board member citizens who would like to participate in some manner with the authority. Would folks have any objection to having citizen members of these subcommittees? And Dan, I guess based on your experience, is that at all non-traditional to do so?
No, thank you, Dave. I think that would be an appropriate activity. I think as you build out your standing committees, having that be representatives of the authority to be on there, as well as other interested parties, groups, associations, whomever, to help with that work. I think this, to be successful with what you're trying to accomplish, it's going to need to be accomplished by more than just the board itself. It's going to have to reach deep, and so I would say that would be appropriate to have citizens help or other partners be parts where it makes sense to join you in your effort.
Great. Thanks for that, Dan. Okay, I guess without objection, we might follow up with some of the folks who've offered to participate in particular subject matter related subcommittees. We do have a hand up from a couple of members of the public. Diane McGone?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm Diane McGone from Superior, and Mineral County is not a part of the authority, but I would like to participate at some level. I'm not sure if I have to go to the commissioners and have them join the authority. The other thing I'm working on is a Rails to Trails Conservancy project across the country. So I don't know if this will ever fit in with that, but so yeah, I would like to be considered as whatever.
Yeah, Diane, so absolutely, folks from anywhere in the state or outside of the state can participate in these meetings. Is there a particular subcommittee that I just mentioned that you would be interested in at least sitting in on initially?
Your subcommittees were the ones you already got members for, right?
That is correct.
The communications.
Okay. Diane, if you could do me a favor and put into the chat your contact information, that way we can follow up with you some specific information after the fact.
Okay, I'll do that.
Okay, thank you.
I'm just trying to figure out how to use this program.
Yeah, there's a lot of virtual platforms and they're all different. If you click on,
I have it.
Okay, very good.
Yes, I do.
And it looks like Paul Passini had his hand up.
Yes, I would like to volunteer for the Strategic Planning Committee.
Okay. Thank you, Paul.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Berg.
Yes.
Is your hand up from earlier or?
Oh, it must have been up from earlier.
Oh, okay. No problem.
There we go.
Jim Gillen.
I would be happy to participate in the Strategic Planning Committee since at this point it seems like blue sky thinking and looking at the big picture is job one.
Okay. Thanks for that, Jim.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else on the subcommittees before we move on? Dan Bucks. You're muted, Dan. Oh,
yes,
there we go.
Yes, I'll unmute. I would be glad to help with both the Finance Committee and the organization or the Rules of Procedure Bylaws subcommittees, if that would be appropriate.
Absolutely. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Well, thanks so much. I think we've got a good start on rounding out the membership of our subcommittees, so that will be a work in process. Tell you what, we will follow up after this meeting with the list of folks in these various subcommittees, and we'll allow each of them to organize amongst themselves, and no need to communicate to the full group here, but it will be up to you to determine a time and method to circle up and have additional discussions. The idea again is that between now and when these full board meetings meet, you'll be having some discussions as far as what the bylaws might look like, what some initial financial matters and tasks would need to be. Dan's offered to maybe help us think through what some initial strategic planning might look like. And Jason, you and me can talk about communications. So,
Dave?
Yes.
And I'll just, for the two committees, I'm willing to help with the bylaws committee and the strategic planning committee. However, if the strategic planning group feels like they can deal with it on their own without my assistance, that's fine too. I've just offered that up, and so if you feel like you've got it and you don't need my support, that's fine. But if you do, I'm there to help you. Likewise with the bylaws, I'll be happy to help with either of those. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Dan. Much appreciated. And it looks like, at least by my count, there are no subcommittees that have a quorum of the body, so it does not look like we'll crack the threshold of a full-on public meeting for any of these subcommittees. Is that what you would concur with, Dan?
I don't know if you want to hear my response.
Maybe not.
Yeah, so it shouldn't be that big a deal, but it's a subdivision of government. Every time you make a committee, a formal committee, it's a subdivision of government that would need to also follow the same noticing requirements. That's the bar that we teach. Now, if Dory advises you or your county attorney advises you separately, I will full-heartedly support that. But when we teach it, we usually talk about subdivisions of government where they're deliberating on the work of that public body. That subdivision that you create also needs to comply with those open meeting and citizen participation laws. It's a bummer.
Thanks for that, Dan. Any discussion amongst the group? We'll need to, again, we're in that uncomfortable mode of needing to figure this out while we are actually trying to do the work that we're hoping to accomplish. So on this note, I will say that we have developed a distribution list for media outlets and newspapers in all of the 12 participating counties. So let's just think through, and I can help organize our thoughts on this as far as what the process would be by which we would notice the subcommittee meetings also, as unwieldy as that may be. More to come. Okay, the next item of business, we'll be determining a principal office. Dan, do you want to talk to this at all?
I can visit briefly on it in 7-14-1631 in the Montana Code. It talks about, and that's in the code that references the creation of a rail authority. And it mentions a principal office, and that's the primary office where the records will be kept. It's just some of those logistical parts. And so as members of the public, because you are an authority that is not constrained by just one jurisdiction, it allows the public an opportunity to go to one source to get its information about the board, its proceedings, the minutes, any of the records. And that one, either a single place, or if you wanted to divide it up and say the principal office for all the records, minutes and this type of records will be at this county. We'll keep those. All the finance records will be kept with this county. You can divvy it up, I would imagine. There's nothing in the law that says you can't, I guess, is a way to put that. But that would allow the public a point of contact. Where do they go to get information about the authority? And at some point, you may create your own office. It wouldn't be affiliated with a county. You might have your own, office facility that you rent space, and this is where you have staff work out of. That could be what would be considered the principal office. But right now, I think designating a location for this principal office would be consistent with the law. And I don't know, Dory, if you have anything to say other, happy to contradict me. It's no problem.
No,
Go ahead, Dory.
Oh, I was going to say, no, I don't at this time, Dan.
Okay. Terry?
Yeah, Commissioner, I would like to propose that we make the central location Missoula County. I think that if we start spreading it out across southern Montana, it's going to get complicated for the public to obtain any records they may want. I think that would be the start I would suggest.
Thanks, Terry, and we would be more than happy to serve in that role, but are there other directors who have thoughts on it? Okay, and this is something we can always revisit at a later date too, but for the time being, we will designate Missoula County as the principal office for the rail authority. We have a caller at 8053. Were you wanting to speak? Okay, just getting a little background noise from you. Okay, at this point, I'd like to turn it back over to Dan briefly to talk a little bit about what a strategic planning framework might look like. And Dan, you've already hinted at this a bit, so maybe there's not a whole lot more to say at this juncture prior to the strategic planning subcommittee gathering.
Yeah, I guess I'll just share with you the framework that we typically engage in when we facilitate strategic planning processes. So at the local government center, we work with local governments all across the state. We work with cities and counties and special districts, and we probably do about a dozen strategic planning efforts every year for like a 911 center to a whole county to a health department. But we have a framework that we operate from, and part of that framework we sometimes will employ a survey that will survey board members. And so that might be a way that you can generate efficiently input from the group. So if you only have maybe 3 or 4 hours that you can spend on working on a strategic plan, the more we can generate ahead of time would be helpful, so that then the group can look through that content and start hearing themes and expectations from the whole group, and then allows you to more efficiently sit down and craft a planning document, having done that work ahead of time. So that's just one way we could approach it, but I'll throw that out for the group to consider. And then what would be the types of questions you would want to ask the group and anticipate the responses and how that might fit in a strategic plan. We have several templates we can work with the committee, the subcommittee with. And then the other question is, how much do you want to engage outside? And is this initial strategic plan going to be board driven, or is it be driven by the board, but also encompass a broader range of interested parties? So just things for you to think about as that group is considering framing out a strategic planning process.
Thanks. And Dan and others, one of the things we have going for us here is that it's not as though it's a complete blank slate that we're working from, and that the joint resolution that all of our participating counties adopted lays out, at least at a high level, what the purpose and vision is of this rail authority. So we're going to be working at restoring passenger rail to southern Montana. So there's a lot of more detail that we can drill down into from there, but that's kind of the big vision. Any other comments on strategic planning right now? Okay, the next item, I just wanted to briefly mention what it would take for additional counties to come on board and participate in the rail authority. I have, as of last week, gotten some indication from Carbon County that they might now be interested in participating in the authority. And I should just mention that for any folks who were not here the last time, the invitations that went out to counties across southern Montana were to counties that once saw or might in the future see again passenger rail service. This could either be replicating the old North Coast Hiawatha line, east-west, or potentially even looking at north-south connectivity between Denver and Billings, or between Salt Lake City and Butte and points beyond. So anyway, as far as what it takes at this juncture for new counties to come on, it was the easiest path forward for counties initially to, as my 11 other colleagues here decided to do, to join initially and adopt the joint resolution establishing the authority. It's slightly more, I wouldn't say onerous, but a little bit more process laden in this next step now that we've already created the authority. Basically, what it would take is for the county who wants to come into the authority to petition us, the rail authority, to do so, and then for us to adopt a resolution accepting them into the authority. So on both fronts, just to get the ball rolling, we have reached out. I've reached out to, and Dory on the line here have reached out to our bond counsel in Missoula County, who is Dorsey and Whitney. And they are in the process of drafting a couple resolutions for either those latecomer counties to adopt, or the resolution that this authority would adopt to accept them into this body. And at the point in time where we hopefully in the next few weeks will have a draft that I can bring forward to the authority and just set ourselves up for that point in time when we actually get the formal request from any additional counties. Any questions on that, on latecomers? Diane.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. As far as Mineral County, the route probably wouldn't go through here. Would it be to our advantage to become a member of the authority, or would it not?
Well, and I guess this would be a discussion for the entire board, and we can add this to a future agenda also, and that is whether we want to stay the course with the process that we've adopted to date, which would be only including counties that would be bisected by a potential future route. And the reason why as you mentioned, Mineral County was not included was not to snub Mineral County or anything by any means. It was that based on the information that I received, it's highly unlikely, given the route up through Evero and Sanders County, that Mineral County would be used for passenger rail. So, but as you pointed out, even if your county is not in the authority, we certainly welcome participation in helping us move this vision forward.
Okay, I just wondered if, I mean, I could talk to the commissioners about it if there was a reason to do it. Although I will say that the passenger train did used to come through Superior and on down to Paradise, I believe. I know it also obviously went over into Avery, into Idaho.
Well, tell you what, let's add that to a future discussion of the authority as far as which counties to extend an offer to again in the future. And as I mentioned, we are already receiving some interest from counties that were originally approached, but weren't able to, or were sitting on the fence until we actually established the authority.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Diane. Okay, we've got a couple hands up. Commissioner Hunthausen from Lewis and Clark County.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate it. And thank you to everyone for doing the work that you're doing. And I wish I was sitting at the table with you, but we are not a member county yet. And I just wanted to also thank you for your consideration of making sure there's a pathway for future members, because I am continuing to encourage our county to participate. And we just completed an election, as you all know, and we have a new commissioner. So there is some opportunity potentially, and I just wanted to thank you for making sure that pathway exists. And I hope to join you in the near future, and we'll see where it goes. But that's it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Hunthausen. And I am only speaking for myself here, but I would certainly welcome Lewis and Clark County and our seat of state government into the rail authority. Dory.
Yeah, it sounds like this is the procedure on new counties is important to look at sooner rather than later. So we are working on the resolutions, but it's also something that would be in the rules and procedures and the bylaws. So that would be a good spot maybe for that committee to start those discussions, and also the sort of non-voting members that are discussed in the resolution establishing the authority. So that committee could kind of put some of that together.
Yep, I think that's spot on. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Eaton.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, it was, as you're considering future counties, I would also encourage you to look at future modes or different modes. The state of Oregon has a very successful bus program that feeds into their passenger rail system. So I think, if you have counties that do not touch the alignment, whatever that alignment may be in the future, there might be connecting bus service that will feed into a very successful passenger rail program. So for future consideration of counties that would support that effort, because it's a multimodal system.
Yeah, that's a great point. And Rob, maybe put a pin in that particular subject, because I think that would be, I certainly would love to hear more about how that works out in practice elsewhere in the country. We have any number of public transportation, urban transportation districts and bus lines in Montana, and some of those entities have leadership that's very interested in what we're doing about rail and making sure that those interface, in addition to any potential Amtrak, I guess, branded bus line would certainly be of interest.
Yep, you have two particular states. The state of Oregon and the state of Colorado have two very successful programs, and I know that Mr. Guard is attending this, and he's from the former Department of Transportation of Oregon. He has a lot to say about that. So we've got some resources that we can help you with.
Great. Thanks so much. All right, that exhausts everything that we have noticed here for new business. There's another opportunity now for any public comment on items, and I'll open it up to either items on the agenda or items off the agenda. Any comment?
Hey,
Yes.
Dave, this is Scott Miller in Carbon County. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Hi, Commissioner.
Hey, how are you today, Commissioner? Hey, I just wanted to introduce myself and let you guys know that we're looking forward to joining you if you will have us, and we appreciate that you guys made a pathway for us to join. I'm not sure what happened at the beginning, but I got elected a couple months ago, and they put a big commissioner word in front of my name, so I have every intention of joining your authority. You know, when we get this petition or thing done for you guys in the next week or so, probably tomorrow, we'll be sending it towards you. And I just wanted to say thanks for having this, and thanks for having me on here.
You bet. Are you riding a horse or in a car? I can't tell there.
I'm in my pickup. My wife's driving. I don't know if I'm going to make it or not, but she's going down the road in Billings, so it's hard to say if we're going to make it back to Carbon County or not.
Okay, thanks, Scott. We look forward to your letter, and we will get cracking on the latecomer resolution, and that's great news. You will be county number 13.
That sounds great. That's my lucky number.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Any other comment, either from Board of Directors members or from the public? Okay. Dan, you look like you were ready to say something. No?
Nope, just you're doing well.
Okay. Anything else to come before the authority today before we talk about next steps? All right. When we sent out the doodle poll a couple weeks ago, we solicited input on a couple different dates. One of them was a meeting date, which we are in right now as we speak. There was some indication, at least at the time, that folks were wanting to meet every other week for at least a little while. And so we went ahead and scheduled a February 5th meeting, and this would be in the morning from 9 to 11 a.m. I've reached out to a couple potential presenters for that meeting, and without objection, I will lock them in. One presenter is the vice chair of the Southern Rail Commission. I believe Rob Eaton had referenced the Southern Rail Commission earlier as a possible model to look at, or at least to interface with as far as how they interact with rail authority-like entities in the southeastern United States. The other individual who also has done a lot of work for the Southern Rail Commission, who is also the chair of Transportation for America and is the former mayor of Meridian, Mississippi, is John Robert Smith. They both agreed to meet with us on February 5th, and I think they'll bring a lot of good content for us to chew on and help prime the pump for our subcommittee work. As far as any other agenda items for that meeting, if indeed there are opportunities for the subcommittees to meet between now and then, which might be difficult, we could certainly have reports from those subcommittees. Anything else that folks would like addressed at that upcoming meeting on February 5th? Okay, Terry.
Yeah, Commissioner, I just want to be sure that following what Dan said earlier, to be an agenda item, we have to have it submitted within 48 hours of the meeting. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And I guess the challenge with subcommittees would be if we were to notice them the same as we are this meeting that we have today, we would essentially need to lock in pretty quick any of the dates for the subcommittee meetings. Like I mentioned, we have the February 5th date already locked in, and we're ready to push out notifications to the 12 counties and the newspapers in those counties. But it might be a little tight getting ducks in a row between now and the 5th for the subcommittees, although not impossible. Diane.
Could you please let us know who's on each subcommittee? I didn't write them down because I didn't realize I could participate.
Yeah, absolutely. And Diane, did you, I haven't checked. Okay, there's your email address.
Yes.
Okay, we will get that out to you.
Thanks.
You bet. I guess the other question for the group, and you can hold the thought as far as if there's anything else that you would like addressed at this upcoming meeting, but it might be more educational than what we're dealing with right now, just in terms of bare process and logistics. But going forward, do we want to have a little bit more time between meetings for subcommittees to do work before reporting back here, as opposed to the 2-week schedule? Because I want to be respectful of everyone's time and make sure that these meetings are meaningful and as substantive as possible. So thoughts from the directors, when you would like to meet next after February 5th, or on what schedule? Do we want to go to a monthly schedule for a period of time? Thoughts from the directors?
I think monthly could be probably as useful as a good useful of our time after this. It seemed like we had a lot of work to do to get kind of up and running, but monthly will be probably adequate after that.
Okay. Other
This
thoughts?
is Mary the Mayor. This is Mary the Mayor. I agree that monthly would be plenty.
Okay. Okay.
This is Bill Berg. That makes sense to me too, especially if we can get the committees stood up.
Okay.
Yeah, Jerry McDonald Sanders, I agree. We've already got some work to do in bylaws and I'm sure on other committees, so we can fully convene, I think, monthly.
Well, without objection, how about this for a strategy? We will stay the course with our February 5th meeting and have that mainly devoted to hearing from our guest speakers, and then any updates that we might have between now and then, such as the latecomer resolution or insurance and such, but then not schedule another meeting until March, which will give us a little over a month for subcommittees to convene and do some initial work. And we could distribute a poll of some sort to try to narrow in on what might be a good standing day and time for meetings going forward, so we're not burdening folks with endless email messages about what meeting time will best work for your schedule, and just lock it in. And if folks can make those meetings, that would be ideal. And if you can't make some meetings, that's to be expected. Does that sound okay for folks?
Yeah.
Thumbs up and silence, and yep, there we go. Okay, well, thanks so much everyone for participating today. Thanks, Dan, for facilitating our highly contentious election process. Thanks, Rob Eaton, for joining us from Amtrak. We hope that you will be a frequent fixture in these meetings. Thanks to all the board members who joined us, to the guests who are non-board members. You're always welcome. We will get out the minutes of this meeting as soon as possible, and we'll include with that the presentation from Rob. We will also include a list of everyone who volunteered for various subcommittees so that you have that in hand. And I might also include some ideas just to help prime the pump for each of those subcommittees to help get you going. And I suspect that as you meet within your subcommittees, you might want to designate someone as the main point of contact for that subcommittee. Jerry McDonald.
Yes, I'm reading in the chat that Andrew, and I can't pronounce the last name, Czorny, wish to serve on the Finance Committee.
Thanks for noting that, Jerry. I had not caught that in the chat. Andrew Charney is the Chief Finance Officer for Missoula County, so that's great.
Perfect.
Yeah, before we adjourn here, just let me just take a quick look at the chat here. For those folks who we've not been able to get to your questions, we will make sure to follow up with you. I did see a question from over in Webo County with the proposed rail line coming through Webo County. Is there any partnership with North Dakota? And the answer is yes and no. Edward, since you're clear over there up against North Dakota, I would certainly welcome any thoughts you might have for outreach to your next door neighbors. I have been in contact with some representatives from the Department of Transportation in North Dakota, and I think we absolutely want to cultivate relations with folks in all of those counties and municipalities heading east through Bismarck and on to Fargo. Okay. With that, thank you so much for sparing some time from your day, and seeing no further business, we will be adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
You bet.